Alright, I've got 4 boxes in front of me. In order to draw them correctly, we're going to be combining all the skills that you've learned from drawing these boxes from observation, all the measuring tools, with the principles of perspective. So the first step is going to be very similar to the way we've always been drawing. You're going to sketch in the object, get the general composition, and then we're going to get out our rulers and make the drawing accurate in terms of perspective. So let's sketch in our objects. I'm going to start off with the box on the left side. Make your drawing small in this case, so disregard the principle of balance of positive and negative space. The reason why is because I want some of the vanishing points to fit on my paper. So use your angle measurements, use your proportion measuring tool. Don't stress too much if they're not entirely correct. We're going to be using perspective to make them exactly right. But I'm using proportion measuring to get distances. I'm using my horizontal and vertical alignment to figure out how far up the boxes go. However, I'm not worried if I'm being somewhat inaccurate. I'm just sketching things in right now. All right, and here's our last box. It's somewhere here, like this. I'll correct the verticals. I'll correct the angles in a second. Okay, so things are sketched in. This is always going to be the first step. You need to sketch something in before you determine where the vanishing points are, where your horizon line is. All right, so let's go back to our box on the left. Let's reinforce the vertical lines. Let's use our red because this is still construction. We're doing construction here. Now, if our lines are less than vertical, I can correct for their lack of verticality. Okay, now let's take a look at the top angle. Let's remeasure it again to make sure it's correct. And then I'm going to line up my ruler with the top angle. And I'm going to draw a line that's going all the way back in space. I don't know where it needs to end yet. I'm just going to extend it all the way out. Then I'm going to do the same thing for my bottom angle. So, if you guys remember, the rule is bottoms up. The reason why it's bottoms up is because the top angle and the bottom angle will eventually, at some point, converge at a vanishing point. So notice the convergence here is almost off the paper. Because I was drawing small enough, I was fortunate and it managed to stay on. So this is box number one. Number one. This is vanishing point R1. So we know what the vanishing point for the object is over here. We also know that vanishing points sit on the horizon line. So not only did we find a vanishing point, we also found where the horizon line is for all of the objects. For every single one. So long as the objects are sitting flat, all on the same plane, they're all going to have the same horizon. Now, if things start tilting, then we have added complications, but we're not going to talk about that for right now. Okay, let's get our second vanishing point. That's going to be vanishing point L1. The problem is, it's going to be off my paper no matter how hard I try. So in this case, when you see that a vanishing point is off the paper, if your box is in perfect two-point perspective, which it is, you guys notice that we're looking at it directly at a corner, all you need to do is make sure that the angles mirror each other. In perfect two-point perspective, whatever angle I have on one side is going to reflect exactly on the opposite side. So now we can get the width here. We can use our proportion measurement tool to get it. Let's get the width here. It's a little bit narrower because the dimensions of this box are more rectangular, right? This back line is easy to get because we can see the vanishing point on this side. Back this way. And then we know that the angle going this way is going to reflect this one. It's going to exactly mirror. There's box number one. Box number two starts over here. Let's reinforce it. And then I noticed something about it. I noticed that the bottom and the top are perfectly vertical. Did I say perfectly vertical? I meant perfectly horizontal. The sides are perfectly vertical, of course, on all of them. What does that tell us about the box? When does a box have an angle that is perfectly horizontal here, perfectly horizontal here, when it's 1 point perspective? So quite often you can have both 2 points and 1 point all in the same drawing. How do we determine where the vanishing point is? Well, it's going to be directly above the object. So when we look at the angles here and here, I notice that they taper in slightly, just a little bit, and that they go back in space to a point on the horizon line that is more or less directly above the object. So it might be in the middle of the object, directly above here. It might be a little off to the side here, in which case one of the angles is going to be perfectly vertical, the other one's going to taper to the vanishing point here. But if the vanishing point is completely off the object, then it's no longer 1 point perspective, it's now a gentle 2 point perspective. All right, now let's get the angle here, like this. All right, that's box number 2. Let's get box number 3. So this is 2. Let's mark this off VP2. It's only going to have one vanishing point. Let's get the vertical line here. And then I notice that the angles here are pretty shallow. Let's get the top angle. And then when I drop down to the bottom angle, I notice that the difference is very, very slight. What does that tell us? That tells us that because of the way the box is rotated, these two lines are going to converge somewhere in the other room, in my bedroom possibly, maybe even further. It could be down the block somewhere, completely off my property. However, when that happens, the other vanishing point moves closer and closer in. So on this side, the vanishing point is going to be very close to the object. So when I look at it and extend it all the way back, the vanishing point here is really close. So here is the side of the box on this side. That's easy. However, this is difficult. So what do you do when a vanishing point is that far off the paper, where you can no longer see it, where it's even hard to keep a mental note of it? What do? Well, you do your best. You try to keep a mental note of it as much as you can. But you can also draw a little guide to help you. So you can use your pencil. Here's one orthogonal going back in space. You notice that this one tilts a little bit, just a little bit. And then you can keep drawing orthogonals going back in space and then flattening them a little bit, every single time. You notice that every time I move my ruler up, I flatten my line a little bit. I flatten it even more, up, I flatten it, so that by the time I get to the horizon line, it's perfectly flat. This creates a grid, guidelines. I went a little bit off here, I touched my horizon line. This creates a guideline to help me build my drawing. So if we have a number of boxes all rotated in this direction, having a grid penciled in underneath your drawing will help you keep your lines consistent. In this case, this is the only box that's rotated that way. It's probably not useful in this case. It will be when you're drawing landscapes, however. Having that kind of grid underneath really, really helps. Now, there is a way to calculate exactly what the angles are. However, for what we're doing, it's probably not worth the time to learn. If you're doing really complicated architectural drawing, okay. Now, that's box number 3. So these lines are going in the direction of VPL3. VPR3, however, is perfectly visible. We can see it. Okay, we've got one last box. Let's draw it. Let's get this vertical exactly right. Let's reinforce it. And then I notice that the angles here are very shallow. They're very, very shallow. And that the difference between the top and bottom angle is very slight, which indicates that this box is the reverse of this box. The vanishing points on this side are going to be really, really far away. So I can use that same grid method to help me. I'm not going to bother. There's going to be a buildup of grids here that gets really complicated. But again, this is a box with a vanishing point that is on my patio somewhere, maybe even further. Okay, however, on this side, the vanishing points are really easy to see. This is going this way, this is going like this. Again, keep in mind, when the vanishing points on one side are way off the paper, down the block, by your neighbor's house, the vanishing point on the other side gets really close. Alright, so here it is. And the other side, it falls ever so slightly short of the corner of the box here. So this is two-point perspective when dealing with reality. Reality is messy. It's complicated. Quite often, reality is not straight. Architecture is not built straight, especially modern architecture. Things are not built on a grid, like some kind of Roman military village. Life gets complicated, and so does perspective. However, with a combination of our observational drawing measuring tools and understanding perspective, things are manageable. Now, we're going to go from boxes to drawing landscape with lots of architectural details. You're going to need absolutely everything at your disposal. Your angle measurement, your proportion measurement, definitely vertical horizontal alignment, and an understanding of 1 and 2 point perspective in order to get it right. Drawing, and this is something I'm always repeating, is a big part of drawing, is understanding what you're looking at. And without knowing where the horizon line is, where the vanishing points are, you're going to get confused by the trees, by the clouds, by the light. You have to know what to look for in order to draw it correctly. So this is why even people that freehand, that never use rulers, that do freehand sketching, study perspective. Spend years learning how to do this with rulers to develop an instinct for it. To be able to look at a landscape and go, aha, the horizon line is here, aha, the vanishing points are here, aha, aha, aha. So, this is not the last perspective drawing you're going to do. We're going to continue using rulers. We're going to increasingly work freehand, however. Until ultimately, when we do pure landscape, just landscape, we're going to get rid of the rulers. We're just going to freehand everything. However, you're still going to have to use perspective in order to figure out what the angles are. So, I'm done from now. So this is a drawing with 7 vanishing points. 1 for this box, and then 2 for each additional box. So 1 plus 2, 4, 6, 7 vanishing points. Complicated drawing, but if you do things step by step, tackleable, manageable.